the vendor can put on a very good presentation and maybe it's good for a very specific thing. But again, just being conscious that you do need to guide the conversation in a way where people don't get distracted by the bells and the whistles. And
hello, welcome, and thank you for tuning into Channel Voices, the podcast for future channel leaders, where we learn the ins and outs of partner ecosystems through casual conversations with channel professionals from a variety of industries, partner types, and geographies. My name is Maciek, and I'm your host. Maeve O'Connell, welcome to Channel Voices.
Thanks, Maciek. Glad to be here.
Excellent. Maeve, people will see, obviously, the audience listening to this now, they have clicked into it because they've seen the title of this episode, the challenges of choosing and configuring partner systems. Now, this is such a broad and detailed type of subject. So maybe before we even get into the first question around this, could you maybe tell us what is it that you do day to day? What is your job?
So I work for a company called Nuix. We're an enterprise software company. Basically, we're an intelligence and analytics company. So our software helps people, what we like to say is find truth in the digital world. So a lot of our customers we have a lot of kind of public sector, so law enforcement, government customers, kind of going into corporates. We work a lot with e-discovery as well. So from a day-to-day point of view, we have a relatively large, of course, depending on the size of company you're talking about, we have almost 200 partners across a wide variety of areas. So we have partners, anything from the size of, one or two people to thousands. So we have quite a varied spectrum of partners that we interact with. So specifically for what I do, I look after the programs and operations side of things. So I'm responsible for all the processes that we use to manage and interact with those partners, the structures that we put around the different stages of their journey with us, and then kind of encompassing that as well as all the systems that we use to support them on that journey. So my day-to-day can be pretty varied. At the moment, I'm very involved in organising some sales training for partners, which is coming up in the next few weeks. So that's quite time-consuming. So yeah, that's kind of a general overview of what I do.
Excellent. And I think that it's a really good segue into the partner systems, right? You said, 200 partners in various regions. You have them in different segments where they play with you as a vendor. And as a vendor, you have to serve them up with something, right? And managing partners on spreadsheets, on email, with supplying collateral via email. I mean, that's the thing of the past. So when vendors start planning the kind of digitizing their channel offering, where do they start in terms of, am I going to build this? Am I going to buy something? If so, what do I do? How do I go about it as a vendor once I have that thought that I cannot manage this manually anymore? I need some kind of system.
Yeah, I guess, there's a few things that pop into my mind. I suppose the first thing that I would think of, and it's probably true for most organizations who work with partners, is they probably already have systems that partners use to interact with us, right? So the first thing I'd probably do is kind of do a level set of what those systems actually are, and how we're actually using them to better support the program, right? Because typically, I'll just think of my company, we already have a learning management system, for example. Partners interact with us, and that way we have, a download portal where they download the software. What does that look like? They probably have access to support systems. We use ServiceNow, for example, so they have access to that. So I suppose that's the first thing, just as to bear in mind the interactions the partners already have with the existing systems, and just think about how that actually works. The other thing then, I suppose, when it comes to level setting, is thinking about how our own internal systems are set up to manage partners. So, most companies will have some kind of CRM, be that Salesforce or what have you. So what can we do within Salesforce that can help us, manage the program better? Do we need to structure it differently? Is there different reports that we can get out? Do we need to think about using it in a different way? So that's probably the first thing I would think about. Then I suppose the other obvious things would be, what's the budget? So if you are going to invest in a partner system, how much money do you have to spend? Who's responsible for upkeep and management of the system as well? Because that is quite a big thing. Who else within the organization is going to need to buy into the idea? So if you are going to be buying a new system and bringing something in, there's going to be some kind of integration. You're probably going to need a few different stakeholders to buy into the idea to help you support that as well. Then I suppose the more program specific stuff, understanding the types of partners you have and the supports they actually need. And as well, the different mix of partners that you have and how they might differ for your company. So just really getting a feel for what it is you actually want to do, because I think a lot of companies will tend to make the mistake at the beginning of thinking that a system is going to manage their program for them, whereas really what a system is used to support their existing program. So you can't expect to bring in something and for it to make a massive change unless you have the thought and the time and the effort put into the back end to understand what it is exactly that system is going to be supporting.
Perfect. And typically, who would be involved within a vendor organization to bring something like that in? You mentioned integrations. Obviously, IT will have to be involved. But when I'm thinking about this, so sales would have to get involved, operations, obviously, IT, marketing. Anybody else I'm missing?
Well, for us, I suppose, other than the people that you've mentioned, our learning and development team are a big stakeholder, because anything to do with training and enablement, they have involvement in, a very large involvement. So they would be another stakeholder. And I think specifically to do with learning and development, so that's an interesting one, because, the partner portal can be used to manage certain elements of a partner's enablement journey, but then, certain elements are going to be stored within the company's academy as well. So you need to kind of understand how that is going to look for the partner. Are there specific partner pieces that you want to create for them, and where do you store them versus what do we store that's shareable with partners and customers and internal employees as well. So, yeah.
Okay. And except for, I suppose, the budget and the integrations, what other things would play into making a decision to shortlist a list of solutions? Like how would you go about that?
So I think the most important thing, and I mentioned it, and I think the answer there to the first question is just let the elements of the program guide you to the systems that you choose to implement, right? Because there's no point in implementing a system for lead management if you don't have any leads to share with your partners, or that's not a part of the program. If the expectation isn't there, no matter how good the system is, it's not really going to work for you, right? So that's the first thing. I think there's probably common elements in every program, but what you need to do for your own setup and for your own company, I think, is really understand how the systems need to work for you, and how you need to be going to market with your partners and all the different nuances that your program has. I think as regards shortlisting, again, I would probably encourage you to engage with as many vendors as possible. I think some vendors, in my experience, are better than others at customer success, and that's been very valuable to me in my conversations with vendors. So there is definitely an element of being able to get information and ideas of best practice and ideas about what other companies are doing when it comes to different elements of programs, from people who are doing it every day and whose job it is to set up these programs in specific ways. So I've certainly learned a lot from my conversations with vendors when it comes to kind of industry best practice. And you get a lot of ideas, and you realize that sometimes the problems that you have aren't just solely your own problems, that other people have the same problems as well, and different ideas about how you can go around and fix those things. I think the other thing I'd be mindful of when deciding on shortlisting is, so some systems can be very specific on the things that they do.
Right.
And I think sometimes the messaging on the specifics can get lost depending on people who are engaging in the conversation. So that be from, your own company side, I suppose is what I'm thinking about. So, you can have people attend, different stakeholders attend, sessions with vendors, and the vendor can put on a very good presentation, and maybe it's good for a very specific thing. But again, just being conscious that you do need to guide the conversation in a way where people don't get distracted by the bells and the whistles, and people throw phrases out. I think quite often that people will kind of hook onto, but really what you want to get down to is like, be very specific on what it is that you want them to do.
Okay. So in terms of functionality and supporting the overarching channel program, and obviously channel programs do change as economy changes, as the situation changes, as we have seen last year with the pandemic kicking in. I mean, a lot of companies made changes to their channel programs to support their partners better, to enable them faster, and make sure that they're successful when they go and speak to their customers about your products. So in terms of future proofing, would there be any specifics that you would be looking for when you're evaluating a partner system?
I suppose as regards future proofing, I think what you need to bear in mind is having a kind of a forward view of where you want your program to go, because I think you always need to be aware, which I think is your point, is that things are going to change, right? So you don't want to be building a system where, it becomes very...
It's only for today.
It's only for today, yeah.
Right?
You don't want to be building a system where in 6 months or a year or 2 years or 5 years or however many years down the line it is, it's very difficult to change, or you end up having to completely rip out the system and go with a big bang approach with a new vendor, for example. So that's always in the back of my mind as well when I'm having conversations with vendors is, how easy is it to integrate into a system that you already have, for example, or if we wanted to change it, how difficult would that be? Or, how much effort am I going to have to make internally for us as a company to kind of put that system in place? Because, that is an effort as well, right? So I would say probably thinking about the program in a kind of a medium to long term view, and always bearing that in mind. I think when you're having these outside conversations with vendors is very important, and not getting too distracted by what you think looks good right now, rather just making sure that you have the basics and building on the basics, then I think is important. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. So say we shortlisted a couple of solutions. We have now maybe decided this is the vendor we're going to go with. It does everything we need today. It integrates with all of our systems. We talked a little bit about the future proofing. If we were to change anything on our existing systems, how would that be in terms of integration? How easy would it be? But then you have to launch it. You go live. You have said it to your partners in your partners newsletter that on this and this day, we are going to launch the absolutely newest, greatest, best ever system for them. How easy is it to configure a system like this for the go live date? And what does it take to keep it maintained?
Yeah, it's a difficult question. So I suppose as regards configuring systems, there's a couple of things that come to mind. The first thing is there customization that your system needs that isn't out of the box? So for us, when we went with a new partner portal a few years ago, we actually ended up buying from 2 different vendors. So there was quite a lot of customization that was involved between those 2 different vendors and our own systems as well. So that could be kind of tricky to navigate as well, because you're having to have those 2 vendors speak to each other. So that is one thing to bear in mind. I suppose the second thing that comes into my mind is, just the process by which we give access to the partners. So do we want to front load all of our existing partners with all of our existing contacts and share the information that way, or do we want them to come to us directly and kind of manage it on a more account by account, partner by partner basis? That can be an interesting question because, the idea of, how clean your data is when it comes to partners kind of comes up then, where you're storing your partner contacts. Might you be giving access to somebody you don't want to give access to? I suppose with some of our portals, you're asking questions like, what partners actually need access to this piece? So do we want to give access to a specific tier, or do we want to do it by industry or domain, or is there that element that we need to take into consideration? So there is quite a lot of planning that needs to be done before you go and actually switch it on, I guess. The other thing you need to think about is, your internal stakeholders. So partners, of course, are going to talk to you, but they have so many other people within your organization who they talk to as well. So you need to make sure all of those people know that this is happening and understand what the process is. If the partner comes to them, tell them this is what we've done. The partner presumably won't understand or won't, make the effort to go by the process. So they'll probably just come to you and say, I'm not sure how to get access. So you'll be dealing with all of those kind of ad hoc questions as well. So just making sure that the internal people are aware that this is happening, and, there isn't a sense of panic that happens then when people come to them with questions, as invariably they will. So yeah, I think those are probably the main things. I think as regards, customization, I suppose, and configuration, I suppose the other thing that pops into my mind is kind of the day-to-day changes, because I think there are going to be smaller or bigger changes that you make to the systems that you use to support the partners, right? And some of them might be in line with different programs as you develop different programs. But there's also that idea of maintenance, which is just making sure that the information that is in the system is the most up to date. And that can often be quite difficult because for any organization, I suppose at the moment, managing systems is always a challenge. So you need to be sure, and it's something that I'm quite conscious of as well, actually, is that the information that we're sharing with our partners is the most up-to-date information. And you don't want to run the risk of them having a conversation. Like I say, they have so many relationships with the organization, having a conversation with somebody else and getting a different message. So that idea of customization and making sure that the portal is up to date and constantly kind of moving with what the company message is as well is actually really important to bear in mind.
Excellent. Thank you. There's one thing you mentioned that really got me interested in, and I have these type of conversations now and again with people in my role, is that, whatever system you deploy, it is not going to fix your data, right? That system is being fed data and displays data back, right? Or takes the data and puts it back into your systems. So in terms of the readiness of a vendor implementing a partner system, data is definitely one thing that they need to make sure is clean, or they clean it during the implementation process maybe and fix things. But what other aspects, or what other areas do you think a vendor needs to be absolutely ready with before they go and launch a portal, for example?
I suppose one of the things is the messaging that you're going out to partners with. So how you choose to do that is one thing. Are you giving them the message that this is an amazing piece of new software and it's going to revolutionize our partner program and it's going to make working with us so much easier? Or do you want to take a softer message, maybe go more gently and kind of let the support kind of build on itself and let the momentum build on itself, rather than kind of going full out, big change, big improvement? I think that's probably one thing that you need to think about. For me, I never like making grand exclamations or grand messages, and so I'd probably work more towards the second one of those, because I think there are always going to be teething problems with systems. And partners can have more or less expectations on a system as well. Maybe they've experience with a lot of different vendor systems, right? So maybe they have ideas on what's good and what's not. But also I think there can be an element from partners of making everything, easy for them, which of course you want to do, but you also need to be aware that not everything can be delivered through one route, right? So the system is only one way they contact us. They interact with us in so many different ways as well. So I think that's one of the other things that I would probably be conscious of as well.
If I was to ask you to describe the perfect fit partner system, how would you describe it?
I don't think there is such a thing. So I think it's generally accepted that there's no one system that can do everything for your partners, right? I think we've all seen Jay McBain. I know he was a guest on one of your previous podcasts, and I think he has about 180 different systems, that he's gathered together as globally. These are the the main systems that people can use to support their channel, and 180 is quite a lot, right? So I think my first comment on that is, unfortunately, there isn't a perfect fit partner system. I suppose theoretically, the perfect fit would be, what's helping you support your program as it is right now. Bearing in mind that will always change. I don't think you're ever going to reach a point where you never need to make tweaks to the system. Even the most advanced programs for vendors who have, long-standing partner programs are going to want to make changes or try something new, or, even you hear a lot of conversation around simplifying programs. So, sometimes you kind of end up growing a program organically in the systems along with it, and you end up with a really complicated kind of structure around how we manage the partners. So sometimes there's even an element of stripping back on the systems and stripping back on the programs and trying to understand really what it is that our partners need. So there isn't such a thing, Maciek, unfortunately, but I think there's a good business opportunity there for somebody.
There you go. Excellent. And thank you very much, Maeve. This was definitely very useful, and I learned a lot about how vendors go around implementing a partner system to support not only their program and what the vendor wants to get out of it, but also enabling their partners, right? And giving them the tools that they need on a daily basis that they can access at any time. But before we finish, I always ask this question every single person on this podcast. What's the one thing you wish you knew before you started your career in channel?
Yeah, so it's a hard question, actually. I was thinking about it this morning before I came on to this recording. So I think how varied the area actually is something I wasn't aware of, at the kind of the time where I started my career working with partners. There's such a wide variety of skills and knowledge that is needed to support partners. And it's across all elements of the business, really. So, there's obviously the relationship management side of things. There's business development, but there's also, and I suppose where I come in, is the operational side as well. So how it is that, the how behind how we actually manage all of this stuff and how all of this works. I think that's really interesting. There's also like a really wide variety of positions. So you can come in from anything to junior, you can work your way through, working up to, some more senior exec levels. But you also have the opportunity, I think, to kind of work across different aspects of working with channel partners as well. So, you can move from relationships to more an operational side of things. And it gives you a really good view of, all elements of a business and how a business works. Because I think with partners, I think some people fall into the trap of thinking that they're their own little piece of a business, but in reality, they span the entire business, really. And one of the things I really like about working with partners is, within my own organization, I get to work with pretty much all parts of the organization, because the partner program touches all parts of the organization, right? So it can be really interesting because you get to learn about a business as a whole, as opposed to just learning about your own little piece of it.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Maeve, thank you so much for coming onto Channel Voices podcast. Really appreciate you sharing all the knowledge and the know-how when it comes to digitizing the partner experience and implementing tools like portals and other tools that partners need access to. Thank you so much for being a guest, and we hope to get you back on the podcast in some near future to discuss maybe some other subjects.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me, Maciek.
Thank you so much. And that's a wrap for this episode. I do hope you found it valuable, and if you did, please make sure to subscribe and leave a review. You can also follow Channel Voices Podcast on LinkedIn, Twitter and Facebook, or just visit channelvoices.com where you can send me a message or leave a voicemail. All of the links are listed in the show notes, and once again, I appreciate you tuning in today. Until next time.